Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to the 125th edition of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast. Brought to you by me, your host, Mac B. the Wolf. And I will be joined as always by my partner in crime from the East Coast of the USA, Mr. Gary Action Jackson. And I got to say thank you to everybody who downloaded and listened to our Van Halen OU812 episode. Really got great response from it. And it was very popular. It did very well. I know we've done a few Van Halen albums in the past. We've reviewed the debut. We've reviewed Diver Down. We did an Eddie tribute as our very first show, and we had no idea what we were doing. And I'm sure our sound quality was not great. But we really appreciate everybody tuning in for that one. It seemed to strike a chord with a lot of folks, and we got a lot of great responses on our poll saying, hey, what was your favorite song? When It's Love topped the poll, which I guess is not a huge surprise. It was a big hit, especially in America. Mine All Mine's still my favorite, and I was kind of disappointed where it came in the poll, kind of third there. But please go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. Now this week for number 125, we're actually going to talk about a debut album that came out the same year as Van Halen's debut. And it featured a budding guitar hero, only very different style from Mr. Eddie Van Halen, and that's Dire Straits' debut, the eponymously titled Dire Straits, which had some great work on it, but I think everybody knows their big single and enduring hit, Sultans of Swing. Talking about seeing a band in South London. We may not be the greatest band in the world, but they got a killer name in Sultans of Swing. It really kicked off the careers for Dire Straits and for Mark Knopfler, who's done some amazing work as a solo artist in his days since Dire Straits. I've been fortunate enough to see him a few times in my life, and I'm always just blown away by him. He has an amazing finger-picking technique that not a lot of people do. He gets great sound out of his guitar, and he's just an amazing songwriter. He really knows how to tell a story, to capture a scene, and translate it into songs and lyrics that make sense and that are relatable to everybody. And that's very country songwriting style, I feel like. But it's not just country. There's definitely rock. There's definitely blues. There's definitely folk. Every once in a while, you might get a little bit of jazz in there. So because Mark Knopfler has been huge in my life, because the She-Wolf is a big country music fan, and we found some common ground there, and I've taken her to see him a few times, we thought we'd review his debut. And it's also a nice follow-up to our Alchemy review, which we did really as one of our first 15 shows, and has proved to be incredibly popular. It's like somewhere, everywhere around the world, every day, somebody's listening to that one. And I love Alchemy. One of the best live albums ever. It really showcases the talent of Mark and the band and how they've grown to that point. And obviously Sultans of Swing is on there, though it's the only one from the debut on that live album. So does that mean the debut is no good other than Sultans? No. There's a lot of diverse and killer cool songs on there. And we'll get to that here in just a minute. But first, we do have a little bit of business to take care of, and we have to mention that we are proud members of the Pantheon Podcast Network. About 100 great shows out there, all different genres. There's something for everyone there. And there's a cool app that you can get on your phone or your iPad or tablet, Pantheon Podcast. You can go to @PantheonPods to follow on Twitter, or go to pantheonpodcast.com to kind of see the lineup there. And we just added at least a half a dozen new shows, some of which you would know, like Growing Up Rock with our boy Sonny Pooney, who we reviewed Whitesnake's 1987 album with last year. So I won't mention all of them, but definitely go check out Pantheon Pods. And then for you record collectors, you got to check out our sponsor, rarevinyl.com, based in the UK. Look, guys, I've been to their warehouse. I've met their whole team. They have 250,000 things in stock. They take really good care of it, both in procuring it and then shipping it to you. They ship all around the world, and they have everything. They have 12-inch singles, CDs, LPs, posters, point-of-sale stuff from record stores. Whatever you're looking for, they've got it. And if they don't have it, get on their list when it comes back in, and maybe they'll get it for you. So you're looking for that rare first edition record, or you're just looking for something fun from one of your favorite bands. Go to rarevinyl.com, use the code PODCAST, PODCAST, and you can save 10% off your orders. I know we have a lot of great record collectors out there. They had a great Van Halen singles collection that I saw last week, and I know they have great Dire Straits stuff as well. But it's all genres of music, tons of stuff. Go to rarevinyl.com or EIL.com. Use that code podcast and save yourself some money. Find that special treasure that you've been looking for. But back to Dire Straits, they started off as a four-piece. It was Mark Knopfler, lead singer, lead guitar player, songwriter. He writes all the songs. His brother David was on rhythm guitar, providing a little bit of backup vocals. David didn't make it too much longer in the band. It's got to be tough when everyone's telling you, Your brother's so amazing. Your brother's one of the most amazing talents to come along in a long time. It's got to wear on you after a little while. John Illsley on the bass, who's awesome, and he was in every incarnation of Dire Straits from 77 through 95 when they hung it up. And he really stood out big time on Alchemy, but he lays down some great stuff here. And then Pick Withers is on the drums. Those two, I believe, did show up to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, whereas the Knopfler brothers did not. But even though by the genre and the style of the music on this, you never believe that, hey, in just 7 short years, they make this juggernaut called Brothers in Arms would be a worldwide mega hit. You can see the talent, you can see the songwriting ability and the storytelling that's inherent in Mark Knopfler and is what made Dire Straits such an amazing band. So let's go ahead and jump into it here. We're going to go through Dire Straits' debut album from 1978 right here on The Wolf. Let's go to coverage of something positive, and that's our podcast, man. You know, we talk about how important getting positive reviews and 5-star reviews, especially on the big places like Apple, are to a podcast like ours. And when I was in Europe, I can't always see the reviews that happen in the USA. You can kind of often, if you're on Apple, you can only see podcast reviews from the country that you're in.
Right.
But obviously the United States is our biggest market, and in moving back, then I get to see some of these reviews that we've had, and I just want to give shout-outs. Like, here's one that happened between Christmas and New Year's. It says, just the kind of podcast I like. 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. One of my top music podcasts. These guys are right in the wheelhouse of the music I love, and their mix of album reviews, concert reviews, and interviews are a great combination. In addition, the whole American-English contrast adds more variety to the entire experience. Highly recommended! ! That's from Firebird3131 on Apple Podcasts. And we really appreciate that. I mean, we always appreciate that people are listening to us, but giving us a positive review like that is just, it's huge. Now, it doesn't make us feel good, which it does. It makes me feel very good, but it helps find other listeners. I mean, people are looking for good podcasts. They don't go to the 1-star reviews. They go to the 5-star reviews. So that's just a huge help to us. And we really appreciate it, Firebird3131.
It's interesting, too.
Say something nice to him, Gary.
I was going to say, it makes me happy that we can make other people happy, because that's what we're here for. I mean, I understand. I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy talking about the subjects. But if we reach people, and if we turn them on to maybe a different album or a different group that they haven't heard before, then that's makes it all worth it. I'm really glad that people enjoy this.
Yeah, and another good example of that is, you know, we pump up the UK. It's not a UK versus US thing. It's not like we're starting
a rap
animosity or anything between the two countries. It's just the fact of the matter is most of our favorite bands over the years, musical influences, have come from the UK, whether you're talking about the Beatles and the Stones and the Who, you know, all the way down to like Duran Duran and the Cult and stuff in the 80s, you know, and everything in between, Led Zeppelin, all that stuff. A lot of our favorite bands are English-based. And it's just always interesting to me that some bands make it in the U.S., but they don't in the U.K., or vice versa, you know. And it could be an English band makes it in the U.K. or in the U.S., but then doesn't make it in the U.K. But on to this week's subject, a band that really broke big all over the world. This isn't just a UK versus US thing. This is, in the 80s, one of the biggest bands there was, thanks to MTV, and that's Dire Straits. You could not have been bigger in 1986, 87, really all around the world, than Dire Straits. But thanks to the video to Money for Nothing, which of course now looks like something, you know, we could make on the computer in like half an hour. Mm-hmm. It was cutting edge back then. But that's pop glory. What's it sold? 25, 30 million copies. I don't know how many copies of Brothers in Arms were sold. I know I've got a couple of them. But we're going to focus today on their debut, the self-titled Dire Straits from 1978. And it features, well, one of the best rock songs in the history of ever, in my opinion, and that's Sultans of Swing. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you came to find Dire Straits in your life, and then how you work back to Sultans and this first album?
Well, I mean, like you said, I came to it probably like everybody else. I mean, you saw Money for Nothing. That was huge. It was on all the time. Heavy rotation in 1985, 86. Yeah, realized that the album was big. I didn't realize it was 30 million copies big. This is one of the biggest selling bands in the world. I think they've got like 128 million copies sold. And even this one, even though I think they had Water of Life was the other single, Sultans of Swing was the big one. This still sold 2 or 3 million copies in the United States. So
Right.
this is huge. Got into them. The kind of the strange part about this was they never really had a follow-up to Brothers in Arms until I think 91. So they
Yes.
kind of fell off the map a little bit. I think Knopfler was tired of the whole deal. But yeah, got into it, basically worked backwards, got into Brothers in Arms, and then found Sultans of Swing and kind of worked it from there. Even though that's still in pretty heavy rotation on classic rock radio.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, no, and that 128 million, that's really only on 6 studio albums, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, kind of amazing. Yes, they've had some greatest hits. They had an EP. I'm a huge fan of course, Alchemy, the live album from 1984, which
Right.
is the subject of our 12th episode, which continues to do well. There must be some review out there that I haven't seen on Alchemy because it's good for 2 or 3 a day downloads or listens in perpetuity. You know, even though it's more than 2 years old, we still get people listening to that every single day, which is great. But it was not your favorite. I remember when I suggested we do it because it's such a huge album for me. It's one I listen to all the time. You're like, yeah, I don't really know this album.
Well, it's good because, like you said before, you need to have your comfort zone pushed. And most of the time, I can't really imagine you would ever listen to a record where I would just say, I don't like it at all. If you like it, it's probably in the wheelhouse of this universe. So give it a try. One that I just never experienced before. Not that I didn't like it, I just
Right.
had no relationship with it.
Right. No, exactly. You know, but what's interesting about that, because it did go gold in the U.S. and it sold well, and it had a video that accompanied it, so you could see them. I believe it was filmed at Hammersmith, which is always a cool place to do a recording. But Sultans of Swing was the only song off this first record to make it on to the double live album, which is interesting to me because they were only 4 albums in at that point, plus an EP. So you'd figure, well, they'll, like you said, Water of Love was a single. Down to the Waterline was kind of popular. It's something that gets played on American rock radio to this day. So you figured there'll be at least one more song on there from there, but that's just not the case. I guess it's the power of Sultans of Swing on its own.
I guess. I mean, it's interesting because you would think, okay, so if you work it backwards, if you look at that, you would say, well, I guess the rest of this debut was not really that great if they only put one song on, but that's not the case. I
Right.
don't even know if there's one song on here that I don't like.
No, and that's kind of typical to me of Mark Knopfler. So, my experience is just like yours. I learned who Dire Straits was basically from Money for Nothing, the huge video that you couldn't escape with the kind of block looking,
Yeah.
cartoon guys moving those refrigerators around with Sting singing in the background. That was my exposure to Dire Straits. But then a couple years later, as we get into high school, you start to hear Sultans of Swing on the radio and pick out, wow, that's some really amazing guitar work on this Sultans of Swing song. I'd never heard that before. And honestly, I have great reverence for the song. I think it's one of the greatest rock songs ever. It's amazing that it's on their debut album. And critics at the time were talking about how, Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton are doing some amazing guitar work in the world. And then there's some great songwriters like Bob Dylan out there. But this guy, Mark Knopfler, out of the north of England, he's kind of both. He's kind of pushing this guitar hero, guitar god thing in a big way. He's doing things that not everybody does. And you're not flashy Eddie Van Halen, which comes out the same year, right? I mean, the debut of Van Halen comes out in 78, just like the debut of Dire Straits.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a guitar god, but not so flashy like Eddie is. And he's got this quality about his songs. It's good storytelling. It's got a little kind of a country vibe to it, but also kind of a Dylan, not only the way he does his songs, but even the way he sings. It's not like it's beautiful, but it's real. You know what I mean?
Right. And it fits exactly the songs that he writes.
Well, that's right.
If he were to write other songs, or if he were to sing other songs, it would sound off. But the ones that he does, it's perfect. It's kind of like that every guy just telling stories.
That's right, and that's kind of what he is. You know, guy from the north who formed a band with his brother, David Knopfler, and his buddy John Ilsley on the bass, and Pick Withers on the drums. And that's kind of an interesting part of it too, is that, you know, Mark Knopfler, guitar god and great songwriter and a great storyteller, he's got a brother, and he was in the band, and he played guitar, and he really only made it through the first two albums.
Well, that's, yeah. I think that's the problem with the band here, is that it's called Dire Straits, right?
Right.
And it's a band, kind of, because all songs written by Mark Knopfler.
Mark Knopfler, all songs.
So it's not really a band. It's you play for me and I tell you what to do and you say how high. And then I think if you get to be, you know, the brother, after a while, you're like, I'm just not doing this anymore. I can't.
I hear you on that. And, you know, there was a good documentary on Dire Straits that kind of interviewed all of them back in the day. And you could see that, you know, Mark was kind of taking all in stride. You know, yes, you know, I'm working with Steely Dan now, and, you know, I'm writing all these songs, and we're getting all these accolades. John Ilsley, you know, was like talking about, yes, life on the road is hard. But, like, on David's face, you could see, like, he was worn out. Like, he's like, this is too much. Because, you know, once you hit it big, then you got to go tour hard, you know, and you got to go all over Europe and all over the world. And it's like, okay, Sultans of Swing is a big hit in America. All right, well, now we got to go do all that. And I think it was hard to do that, you know, touring hard, record, and eventually he kind of opted out before making movies, although I think that maybe some stuff of his may have made it on there, or at least he contributed to some of the songs. But yeah, you know, and look, you're right. I mean, after Brothers in Arms, On Every Street came out when we were in college. I mean, like, basically in that time where it was like there were two big footholds. There was a lot of great classic rock and hard rock being made and released around that time. You know, Use Your Illusion by Guns N' Roses, Black Album by Metallica, Achtung Baby by U2, Def Leppard came back with Adrenalize, you know, Kiss came back with Revenge, and Tom Petty came back with the Heartbreakers after just being Tom Petty on Full Moon Fever. And then, yeah, Dire Straits came back with On Every Street. But the time had kind of started to pass, and I think it was just like, okay, we got to do a follow-up to the hugest album ever, right? Let's do it. We'll do a huge tour. And then basically Mark Knopfler opted out. He's like, you know, I write all the songs. I sing all the songs. I'm the lead guitar in all the songs. I don't need this Dire Straits big machine. I can just go do what I want to do. And he's made more albums as a solo artist than Dire Straits ever made. And I've seen him a couple of times as a solo artist. Saw him at the Ryman in Nashville. I've seen him in Indianapolis, I think twice, at least once. And he's fantastic. And it's basically Dire Straits on a smaller scale, you know, that you get to see in a theater with all this great solo work that he's done over the years. So, yeah, eventually he kind of realized, I don't need the huge machine. I just need to be able to sing my songs. But he still does good stuff from the Dire Straits catalog, and he always does Sultans of Swing. Always.
You got to play the hits. Got to play the hits.
Always does Romeo and Juliet, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was impressed to learn that Muff Winwood produced their first record. Now, they had other big producers, and Jimmy Iovine eventually produced you know, one of their albums. But, you know, to get us out of the gate there as a freshly signed band, to get Muff Winwood, who was in Spencer Davis and has a younger brother named Steve that some people may have heard of.
Name sounds familiar, yeah.
Yeah. It came in and produced their first record. And I guess they had some songs on a demo, about 4 or 5 songs already kind of ready to go. That's what helped them get signed. Obviously, Sultans of Swing was one of them. But he helped them re-record those and put together some new songs. And then on June 9th, 1978, in the UK, that's when the first Dire Straits album was released. It didn't come out till, I think it was October in the United States. So, you know, usually there might be a week or several days between release, but this was a good 4 months between releases. So I don't know if the record company's like, let's just get a good foothold here in England or start in Europe. But yeah, it was a big gap between when it was released in America and the UK.
Yeah, it's interesting how it seems like either Europe to the United States or vice versa, they're not the same record companies. So it's like you get picked up by a different outfit. I don't know whether it's distribution or however that worked, but yeah, maybe it was a deal where they weren't going to take a chance on an unknown band from England until you start to have a little heat there, and you say, okay, well, we can keep that going here. But sight unseen, you're not getting a record deal.
Yeah, not to mention, apparently, this is when punk rules the airwaves, right? It's punk or disco, and this is neither one. This has kind of got this spare kind of country folk Dylan-esque voice. It's like that's not going to work against God Save the Queen or the Ramones or Blondie or something like that. Like that's just not it. But it ended up doing well. I mean, it went up to number 2 on the U.S. Billboard chart and 23 for the year in the 1979 year-end charts, right? Number 3 in the Netherlands, where I used to live. Number 2 in New Zealand. Number 5 in the UK. Top 10 in several places around Europe. And yeah, like you said, at least 2 million sold in America. Double platinum UK, double platinum Switzerland, quadruple platinum Canada, gold platinum all over Europe. We're talking 5, 6, 7 million copies sold anyway. So in the face of punk, it actually held up pretty well on its own.
Well, I think that comes down to the strength of the songs and the playing on this, not just from the Knopfler, but from everybody in the band.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right there. It was recorded in Basing Street Studios in Notting Hill, London. Of course, eventually, Mark would go on to do the Notting Hillbillies, a little side project where they did a lot of picking. It was pretty well received. My wife is a big country music fan, so he eventually did a record with Emmylou Harris called All the Road Running. And that was one that was on my record player quite a bit. Like I'd come home, it would already be on because that's what the She-Wolf wanted to listen to. But then they also did a live one as well. So just another thing in the catalog to check out there.
Hi, I'm Deborah Bonham.
And I am the Irish werewolf in England, Peter Bullock.
And you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London.
But all of a sudden the preamble's gotten a lot longer, so we kind of got to jump in here a little bit. The cover is, kind of simple. It's basically a painting. It looks like there's somebody, looks like an office building to me, an empty office floor. You're kind of looking at it, white skies, basically, and maybe somebody kind of silhouetted standing against the pole with a kind of yellow surrounding, light yellow border. That's about it. Just says Dire Straits on it. Very simple communication there.
Yeah, and you don't know what's happening here. Is the person, like you said, is this an office? Is this person alone? Is it an apartment? Are they looking out the window? You don't know what's going on there. It's very spare, very minimalist. There's not really anything going on there. And then you've got the yellow border, and that's just it. There's no picture of the band. There's no anything on this.
That's right. All right, so we jump in here. First song is Down to the Waterline. And this is one that's played on American classic rock radio, has for decades here. Kind of a mellowish song, but it's got a little bit upbeat. Song about taking his girl down to the river so they can, you're young, you don't have your own place, you might not have a car, you got to find some place. So let's just go down to the waterline, right?
The beginning to me sounds like an 80s cop intro, like that, that bam, 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 and then it goes into the song. It doesn't sound bad. That's just what it reminds me of. But yeah, it gets it's a theme that everyone, especially men, can attest to. Like, yeah, you've got a woman, you don't have your own place, but you would like to spend time with her, preferably alone. Yes. And then the police have to show up and ruin your good time. What are you doing here? Well, you know what we're doing here. Stop.
Yes, go away.
Yeah.
Go bust some skateboarders or something.
Sweet surrender on the quayside. You remember we used to run and hide in the shadow of the cargoes I take.
No, it's funny you said it was an 80s cop soundtrack. I'm like, it has that little late 70s sound on the rhythm guitar that you heard through so many things. You heard it on Nile Rodgers kind of productions and disco stuff. It's very, very 70s to me. You heard a little bit on the Jerry Rafferty show that we did, a few months back. Like there's a little bit, it's just the way that the stuff sounded at that time.
Yeah.
But that's on the rhythm guitar. The guitar solo was very clean, and it wasn't over the top. It wasn't crazy, but it was cool. It really fit the song really well. But the play out solo at the end, that shows a little bit more of what Knopfler can do here.
Well, and it showcased his. I mean, this was, unless you had heard Sultans of Swing on the radio, if you just got this record and this was the first track you were listening to, it introduced you to his style of playing. Because to me, he has his own. He's in his own category. Like, he doesn't play like anyone else. Like, you can tell when you listen, you can tell that's Mark Knopfler. He's got that picking style that he does that just, it looks very bizarre when you see him play. I can imagine that he probably made that up on his own just listening to records, but it works for him. It looks weird, and it doesn't sound like anything else.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing the sound that he gets out of there. And there was I think they may have even called it Money for Nothing. It was the greatest hits that came out while we were in high school that I picked up. We definitely listened to a little bit while we were in college. They showed his fingers on the back of that CD cover, and it shows him finger picking or whatever. It's like, yep, that's how he does it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another thing that got me into it was when we were in high school, I'm going to say it was 89 or something like that. There was a show on MTV about guitar gods or guitar greats, guitar heroes, something like that. So they had stuff about Clapton and Beck and Page and Hendrix and Pete Townsend and blah, blah, blah. Steve Vai's on there, And they had Mark Knopfler on there kind of doing an interview. And it was funny because he was like, everyone says, well, he can play fast, but he's just not doing it. He's like, fact of the matter is I can't. But then they cut to him doing Sultans of Swing live from Alchemy, just doing the solo at the end. And I'm like, yes, he can play fast. Yes, he is awesome at it, man.
And the thing is, too, you mentioned those other guys, Clapton and Steve Vai, and I would challenge them to play this the same way. And I bet they can't. I bet it's just so different. I don't think you could, because in order to play that fast, you have to have more than one finger going.
Right.
And somebody who's used to using a pick, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, maybe Jeff Beck could have before he passed. I don't know. At least he could have tried.
Right. And maybe somebody like Vai, if he put his mind to it, but like sight unseen, if I just gave you the guitar and say, play this, it would not sound the same, because it's just so different.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's a nice way down to the waterline. It's got good melody. It's got good rhythm to it. It's not overpowering. Some lyrics like "She can feel them in the places where the sailors go." Yeah, we know what you're talking about there.
But it's an interesting way of saying that.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, he. I don't think Knopfler gets enough credit for his turn of phrase.
Well, he's a great songwriter. There's no doubt about that. And versus what was going on with the punks, where it's just basically up in your face. This is exactly what's happening. I'm screwing my girl down by the river. Not the same sport, really. But then you move to Water of Love, which was the second single off the record, and the B-side was actually Down to the Waterline. Interesting way to start it. But this is one that you can hear his old National acoustic on this, right? Like the one that's on the cover of the Brothers in Arms record, that's like... Oh,
the steel-looking guitar.
The steel-looking guitar, yeah.
Yeah.
It's oh geez, what's it? It's a 1938 National is the make of that 14 fret guitar. Yeah, with 1938 National style 14 fret guitar, which he's played on a lot of his records. He brings it out on tour with him to this day. You can hear it on this, and he's sliding a little bit on it. Not everybody was playing that. I mean, not only anyone plays it ever, but not everyone was playing that in 1978.
Yeah, and it's got a very distinct sound to it.
Yes,
you can kind of hear that it's very metallic. I mean, I understand that it is a metal guitar, But yeah, it doesn't sound like anything else. I don't know, it could sound like a dulcimer. I don't know. It's cool to look at. It's got a distinct sound, and that little slide on it is very distinctive.
Yeah, and so this kind of has a little bit of a country flick to it. As far as the song goes, the sound of the song, it's over 5 minutes, which is a little long for a single, but it's about unhappy relationships, right? And water of love deep in the ground, but there ain't no water here to be found. And he said that this was one that Knopfler wrote personally. It's like most of the other songs, he's kind of putting himself in other people's shoes and telling their story, but this one was a personal one. He wrote it because I was so fed up, I felt I was going no place. I could see my future stretching out in front of me as long and bleak. Like, ooh, that's not a great place to be, And it didn't do great. I mean, I don't think it scored anywhere in the U.S. 28 in my old home country of the Netherlands, 54 in Australia, whatever that's worth. But didn't really make much of a dent there, and it was the last single they released. I think someone did a remix somewhere that was pretty popular, and he got credit for being a little bit like J.J. Cale, who's probably most famous for Clapton covering his Cocaine song.
Interesting that this could be a song where you just kind of listen to it, and it's kind of a happy vibe to it, but then when you listen to the lyrics, it's kind of sad. So he kind of puts the two things together, and it's not a downer until you really get into the lyrics. And you could almost be like, it almost kind of sounds like a religious track.
Well, a little bit. I feel like the drum rhythm kind of lends to a bit of that. I also want to give credit to John Illsley, who has a nice bass groove on this song. John Illsley is the only other permanent fixture in Dire Straits besides Mark Knopfler. He showed up to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Mark Knopfler didn't. David Knopfler didn't. I think maybe Pick Withers did. One of the drummers did. And Pick was on this. Terry Williams was eventually his replacement in the band. But John Illsley, throughout Dire Straits, especially on Alchemy, you can really feel his presence. And holding everything down behind it so that Mark can go out there and do his thing with his guitar and his voice.
Yeah, and that's a unique skill to have, to be able to know what your role is in the band, and kind of, this is nice because he kind of does get to flex it out a little bit in this one. But yeah, you're right. Your job in life is to lay it down a nice bed so that I can showcase on top. And you've got to be okay with that.
And he seems like a great guy, too. I know our buddy Paul at Vintage Rock Pod has had him on. So open invitation, John. You can come on anytime you want. We would love to talk to you about your time in and out of Dire Straits.
Well, and especially somebody like that who they started as, I would imagine, kids together,
right,
and then to go to the heights of the Money for Nothing, Brothers in Arms spectacle.
Summit,
yes. Summit would be very interesting to him to talk to somebody who's seen everything in the band.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think he was David Knopfler's friend, if I'm not mistaken, and then.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I think that's right. Introduced him to Mark, and they decided to put the band together there. He's also one of the biggest proponents for, let's get together one more time, right? Let's do one more Dire Straits tour. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I know I would probably pay to see it. So we'll see. We'll see. But the Water of Love, all right, there's the single. Didn't break down any big barriers or anything. But see, that was released as a single in later 78. So it comes out, Water of Love, in the Netherlands, released October of 78, whereas Sultans of Swing was released in May of 78 in the UK. Now, we'll come back to that in a bit because, again, album released in October, 20th of October, 1978 in the US. So that's 4.5 months after it's released in the UK, which is a little different. The third song, Setting Me Up, has a bit of a story to it in that it was not a single for Dire Straits, but it was a single for a country act called Highway 101, who I'm unfamiliar with, of course. But in 1989, they released it, and it hit number 7 on the country chart.
Huh. Okay.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know it either. Definitely has more of a country feel than a rock feel, even the Dire Straits version. No,
very country picking from Mark on that, and he is sounding a lot more like Dylan on this one.
Say I'm the greatest, I'm the glory. Well, the word is out and I learned. Back up to the lady, side of the story. You're pulling out before you get burned. Hands are squeezing me down
And I like the sentiment here is definitely country, kind of like that, you setting me up to put me down, just that
Right.
the sad times country feel to this track.
Yeah, it's almost like Clapton on Slow Hand, how he put a little country into that
Mhm.
album, and Lay Down Sally has a little bit of, that country
Yeah.
picking thing going on. It's very, very good guitar work on this one from Mark. It's not rock guitar.
No, and that's the thing too. Like, you were talking about punk being the big new thing, especially in the United States. What is this? Like, it almost doesn't fit into a genre. It's rock, it's country, it's blues, it's jazz, kind of all put together on one record.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what he was going for. I don't know. You wonder, like, do you try to go out and find a sound and then make everything sound like that? Or do you just take your influences from everywhere and figure, let's find something that hits? You want country, we're going to have that. You want bluegrass, we'll have that. You want hard rock, we'll have a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of see what sticks. And then whatever sells, okay, then the next one, we'll make it more down that line.
Right.
But I've heard this album before. I've had the album for a while. It's another one of those things, like, it was easy to get a Dire Straits. Like, these days, it's easy to get, like, give me all the albums in one box. It's like $20 or $25 or something like that. You get all 6. Plus, you might get some outtakes or something like that. So I've had that for a while. And I just remember putting this on, like, all right, Sultans of Swing's on here. What else is on here? It's like, wow, there's some different stuff on here.
Yeah.
It really kind of crosses a lot of genres here.
Yeah, there really isn't anything else that sounds like Sultans of Swing.
No. And it's, it's one of those things where you've got your whole life to write your first album. So you're going to take influences from different places and kind of see what sticks. And there were probably 4 or 5 on that first demo recording. They can't all be Sultans of Swing, and you're probably not going to make Sultans of Swing 2, but because you can't. But we'll get to that song soon enough. The 4th song on here, Six Blade Knife, this is a more bluesy song. This is yet another genre he's kind of tackling here. It's very mellow.
Yeah. I really like this one. This was one of those, I had never heard this song before, and then I probably listened to it 4 or 5 times for this show. Yeah, this is really good. It's another change of pace. I mean, I have it's dark country blues. I don't know what it is, but it works.
Your 6-blade knife, do anything for you. Anything you wanna do. One blade breaking my heart. One blade tearing me apart.
Yeah, and talking about something that could save you or kill you.
Yeah.
Like it's a double-edged sword, literally. And 6-blade knife, I mean, I guess, is that like a dichotomy versus like a 6-shooter kind of thing?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Or a guitar, your 6-string. I don't know what he's talking about here, but yeah, it works. It's a change again from the 3rd track to the 4th track, and it's definitely worth checking out because it will grow on you.
No, I like this one, like you. 1 blade for breaking my heart, 1 blade for tearing me apart. 6-blade knife could do anything for you, So
Yeah.
it's just it could be a job. It could be a woman. I like to be free of it now. I don't want it no more. I know I don't want it no more. It can just be what they want it to be. A needle, a wife, or something you just can't see. So it's kind of like you got to watch out, got to pick your poison, and you got to be careful out there. But I do like it. It's not one you hear a lot,
Right.
on the radio.
There's no solo in it, but he's just picking at it all the time, and just those little gaps that he fills in with the picking on this song are great.
All right, so that's the 4th track on the first side, or 4th track overall. And then the last song on the first side, and it's kind of like the shorter songs. There's 5 songs on the first side, so the shorter songs go on the first side, and then the longer songs go on the second. There's only 4. Southbound Again is the way they kind of wrap up the first side. And this has more upbeat, kind of the staccato picking. And I assume, it's a traveling song a little bit. And I assume when you're talking about heading down, you're talking about heading down to London, to me, from the north.
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, a nice change of pace from the last one. It's upbeat. You've got more of the country feel again on this, kind of coming back to that. The lyrics are a little sad, but that's okay. I mean, that's country. But
Right.
yeah, you definitely feel like you're chugging along on this one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're going somewhere. It's a traveling
Yeah.
song. It's a movement song.
Southbound again. Don't know if I'm gonna leaving home. Southbound again. Don't know if I'm gonna leave it home.
It's very Knopfler, with the big chords that kind of interrupt or interspersed with the picking that he's going on. There's not a whole lot to it. I mean, like you said, there's no solo. It's not a real long song.
Yeah, it's only 2:58.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty short for anybody. Yeah, so it's not even quite 3 minutes. No solo. Lyrics aren't super deep, but it's basically about we're from the north here. We've made it up here, but we got to go down to the capital, to the big city to make it, right? To play gigs, to meet with record industry types, to
Yeah.
record, that kind of stuff. At least that's what I'm assuming here. Southbound again means, yep, we got to go back down there to try to earn a living, to try to compete
Right.
with the big boys. Okay, fine. So that's side one of Dire Straits. They start off side two with Sultans of Swing. Now, that's an interesting choice to me because it was the first single released. Obviously, you've got something special there with Sultans of Swing. It's a story song. Mark's doing some incredible guitar work. Why do you hold it to side two? I understand why it'd be the first song on side two. I just don't understand why it's on side two to begin with.
Yeah, I don't know. There is that school of thought we talked about, Let's Dance a couple of episodes ago where, they front loaded that thing. Everything was up front.
Right.
And then I guess they figure they'll catch you. And then if you listen to the rest of the record, that's fine. But if not, we've got you. It could be a deal where it just fits a little better on the second side. Like you said, they're a little longer. Maybe
Right.
that was what they were going for. And maybe he thought the stuff on the front was strong enough to grab you. Water of Love was a single. I don't know. It for whatever reason, they just felt like it fit better on the second side to kind of kick that off and keep people interested.
Well, and it got a little bit of airplay. It was a bit of a hit before it was even put down on a record. It was recorded in North London as part of their demo.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was at Pathway Studios. And then they took the tape to DJ Charlie Gillett he was on Honky Tonk on BBC Radio London. Like they kind of wanted to talk to him like, hey, what do you think about this? What should we do? How should we proceed? Kind of thing. And he liked it so much that he started putting Sultans of Swing in his rotation on Honky Tonk. And then 2 months later, Dire Straits signed with Phonogram Records. So in 1977, they do the demo. They get it to Charlie. He starts to play it, even though they're unsigned. And then they get a big fat signing bonus from Phonogram and get him out on the road, and they get him to record this first album. So it was kind of a hit before it was a hit.
Yeah, which is interesting now. Why, knowing that, why they didn't just put it as the lead track? It already had some heat coming into this.
But then maybe that's another reason why. It's like, okay, we know you know this one, so we're going to put it here. First, we want you to listen to these 5 songs. Listen to Down to the Waterline, listen to Water of Love, hear what we're kind of really about. Then we'll get you there. We'll get you to the big song. Don't worry about that, though. So as and if you listen to it a 1,000 times like I have, and again, this is one when it comes on the radio, I never change it. This automatically gets turned up. There's some songs that over time that I would have, as younger, would have been like, yep, boom, here we go. And now I'm like, or I'm just not in the mood, right? Like Crazy Train comes on. If I'm in a good mood, yeah, crank it. If I'm tired, I'm like, you know what, let's save that for another time. It's not like I've never heard Crazy Train before. And he played it on his 61 Strat. But so the lyrics were inspired by a performance of a jazz band playing in the corner of an almost empty pub in Deptford, South London. So when you hear lyrics like "South of the river, you stop and you hold everything," talking about jazz in there. And he said at the end of their performance, they announced they were the Sultans of Swing, and Mark just thought that was funny. He's like, they don't look real good, and he's talking about his baggy pants, his platform shoes, or whatever, and like their surroundings. It's like, this is kind of a bummer, but they've got this grandiose name, the Sultans of Swing. So he's like, that's funny, Let's tell a story about these guys. Talk about Harry doesn't mind if he doesn't make the scene because he's got a daytime job. He just, saves up for Friday night to go play with the Sultans kind of thing. I don't know. When did you first find this song?
Probably in high school. And it's one, too, where you can listen to it. You can listen to the track itself, the music, you kind of get caught up in that. But yeah, when you listen to the lyrics and then to know that it kind of sounds like you said, they heard this band or Knopfler heard the band and then just made the story up about them. Like, oh, look at the, Guitar George. He knows all the chords, the rhythm player, and, just not knowing anything about them, just making the story up with seeing them in this little tiny bar. And that would be funny too. Like, okay, thank you. Good night. We are the Sultans of Swing.
That's right.
Playing to these three people? Okay, cool.
Oh man, that's funny. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's definitely got hooks in it musically. And then eventually you get to understand the story and hear it and like, oh, okay, yeah, there's something to that. For the most part, this is considered Dire Straits' best song. I know a lot of people will say Money for Nothing. That was certainly their biggest. It sold the best. It got them on MTV and all that kind of thing. But to me, it's their best song. And who was it? A rock critic, a classic rock magazine, Paul Rees, said the live version on Alchemy is Dire Straits' greatest song. And to me, that is 100% true. You like this song, you hear it on the radio, it's great, it's killer, but then you see the video or hear the live album where they stretch it out, where there's kind of a pause, and then they stretch it out and they build it back up. They slowly kind of build it back up, and it gains this momentum. It's like, oh my God, this is so good. And they play it for like 10 or 11 minutes. It's pretty awesome. It's kind of like your band, The Cult, right? You like Rain, but then you hear, Here Comes the Rain. It's like, oh, right. This is even better,
More is better, yes.
But again, in an odd twist, it was released May 19th, 78 in the UK, ahead of the release of the album. And it does well. It hits the charts in the UK, goes all the way up to number 8, which is great. But then, like we said, the record didn't come out till October 20th in the States. And then the song wasn't released until January of 79. And in February of 79, it hit number 4 in the US. So 9 months after it's released in the UK, was that 3 or 4 months after the album is released in the US, it hits number 4 and does pretty well in other places. I mean, top 10 in Ireland, top 5 in Canada, top 10 in Australia, double platinum in the UK, double platinum in Italy. Just the song, not the album, gold in Canada. So, but to hit number 4 in America, that's what really propelled them to go double platinum on the album.
Yeah. And I think the testament to this song is how, like you said, you can listen to it today. You never get tired of it just because there's so much going on. And you're just waiting for him to just rip into that solo.
Oh no, yeah, it's huge. And at the end, the play out at the end, it's amazing. Honestly, man, I'm pretty certain it's in my top 5 rock songs of all time. Like, it's up there with Comfortably Numb. It's up there with Gimme Shelter. Higher than Hotel California. I mean, this comes on and I'm like, yep, there we go. Now we're off and running. It's so good. It's got great rhythm. It's got great melody. It's telling a great story. His voice is on just right where it needs to be. You hear a little bit of background vocals, which is, I think it's John and David, but it was mostly David, I feel like, in the beginning, just do that Sultans of Swing.
Yeah, it would make sense that their voices would be the most similar to go together to sing harmony because they'd probably been doing it for years at the house.
Probably so. Another interesting piece of this is there's 2 B-sides. One was Southbound again, but there was another one called Eastbound Train. And it's interesting. It's more of a rockabilly song with a little bit of country touches here and there, and there's some fun backing vocals. Like there's a little more backing vocals than we're used to from Dire Straits. It's not like the more polished stuff that they end up doing down the road. And in fact, the only place you could get this other than the B-side in some areas was it was on a live track, and it was on an album called the Hope and Anchor Front Row Festival Live. I guess the Hope and Anchor was a spot in London that broke a lot of people. And, this is just basically like everybody who had played there in 78, I think it was, maybe 77 and 78. But you had people like Steel Pulse on there, but it was a lot of punk stuff, It's like the Stranglers were on there, and Wilco Johnson Band was on there. XTC were on there, who kind of was one of those bands you would see on 120 Minutes once MTV did that back in the day. 999, X-Ray Specs, The Pirates, people like this are on there. And then also Dire Straits, just
Skip the beat. Standing right behind me, I'm shaking in my seat. 3-4 minutes and the train comes through. I'm riding on the Central, I'm looking at you. Yes, I am. Woman on the eastbound train. Sometimes I wonder I'll see you again.
kind of interesting. But then, if they were coming through London, they're playing these kind of gigs, they would have wound up on there. So I had never heard that. So that was cool for me to discover that song, because I was kind of unaware of it, and to be able to hear something that is authentic, something they played back in the day, and not just from that album. You can find other places on YouTube where they played it later than that, but certainly a B-side compared to Sultans of Swing. I love this song, man. I have incredibly fond memories of it from back in the day. I love it on Alchemy. It's one of the most amazing. How can we make a great song even better? Because usually you do it live and it's just going to be not quite as good, or you're going to throw something in there that's unnecessary. Not on Alchemy, man. It's so good. It's unbelievable. Yes. Do you agree with me on that?
On the live part of it, the live track?
Or just how good it is overall.
It is, because there's a lot. I think there's a lot of songs, now that I'm thinking about this, the more that you listen to them, it's the law of diminishing returns, because there's really only one part in that you really like. You were talking about Crazy Train. That's the beginning part. You've got the riff, and then you've got the solo, but the rest of it is kind of just chugs along. There's a lot going on here in this song. You've got the initial kind of riff that starts it off, and then you get into his lead part of it. But then, like you said, if you listen to what else is going on, the rhythm part of it, there's more there than you think. There's when they transition the drum, he kind of does the hi-hat into the next part. I think that's what really makes this song stand up. Is it doesn't seem complex, but it is, and you can appreciate more and more of it the more that you listen to the song.
Yeah, and you can't overlook John Illsley on this one either. He is definitely laying down some great stuff. And look, there's just 4 of them playing on this one, whereas on the live one, there's 6 people, and Hal Linz is in the band instead of David, and Terry Williams is doing some amazing drum. Not that pick is bad or anything, but Terry Williams kind of picks up a notch. They got a couple of keyboard players for him to bounce off of, so it is different, and there's more to it. But no, this is, and considering it's on their debut record, this wasn't something that you got 2, 3, or 4 records in. This is basically what got you signed. This is unbelievable for a debut.
And it's interesting too how, like you said, they still play it live, or Knopfler still plays it live. There's a lot of bands that once you make it big, once you get that big record, big tour, or whatever, you kind of forget about the early stuff, and he will never forget about this. This is still his signature song. I would say even more than Money for Nothing.
I would say so too, and he doesn't play that much. Maybe Romeo and Juliet, which I was interested to find. It wasn't a hit, although it's been in a lot of movies, and it's kind of classic rock staple. It's a love song. It didn't hit when it was released, but it has kind of grown in stature over the years. He always plays that. I remember seeing him in Indianapolis, and we had killer seats. We're in the 3rd row, maybe the 4th, something like that, and I'm waiting for him to play Sultans of Swing. Everybody's sitting down, and he does it relatively early. But then when he plays it, I say, forget it. I'm standing up, and I'm cheering along to this. She-Wolf was with me. I'm pumping my hands. I'm seeing him yeah, this is great. And I turn around, and no one else is standing up. We're literally the only 2 people in the joint standing up. And somebody said, you wanted to see that one, huh? I'm yeah, that's my favorite song. You sit around waiting for Walk of Life? What's wrong with you, man? That's so amazing, man. Why don't you love that song? So
Hi, I'm Paul Stevenson from Vintage Rock Pod, and you're listening to The Ugly American Werewolf in London.
Anyway, Sultans of Swing, one of the greatest rock songs ever, 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 ever. And I guess we have to move on at some point here. So,
all right.
Might as well scoot along to In the Gallery,
Mm-hmm.
which is another one that they played live for a while. It didn't make it onto Alchemy, but this is this is like country, but kind of funky too. This one.
Yeah, I have upbeat country, upbeat blues country question mark. Like it's kind of its own thing. It's got a couple of different influences coming together on this one. This is another nice change of pace though, because it's not the same. We're not going into another single. This is something totally different from Sultans of Swing.
It was ignored by all trendy boys in London, yes, and in Leeds. He might as well have been making toys, strings of bees. It couldn't be. No, it couldn't be. In the gallery.
Yeah, and the subject matter seems to deal with like how phony the art world is. Like we've got this young guy here, and he's trying to make it in the art world, and the phonies who run it don't want to have anything to do with it. Like we decide, what art is. We decide what culture is, and you're not it, kind of thing. And he tried to make it. Maybe he tried too hard. It sounds like he died probably from drugs. There's a word junk in there someplace, like talking about maybe his work was junk, but maybe it was the junk that ended up killing him. Again, he's a heck of a good songwriter, this Mark Knopfler.
And I could see how you could write a song about a band, because you're in a band. This is what you love. This is what you can relate to. You can also write songs about being in love and having relationships. Okay, I get that. Right. But like to go to an art metaphor, doing your own thing, I don't know. And is there something about him in this, about how this Dire Straits doesn't really sound like anyone else? Is that maybe part of him that, at one point in time, somebody said, if you want to make it big, kid, you've got to pick something, or you've got to sound like this. And he just said, I'm going to do my own thing. I don't know.
That's fair enough. And talk about, he's ignored by all the trendy boys in London and in Leeds. He might as well have been making toys or a string of beads. No, he couldn't be in the gallery. And But some of these people, they just take an empty canvas, they stick that on them. And then all the other phonies are like, oh, that's so avant-garde. It's like all the fakes, all this, so it's crap. Basically the dealers and those people kind of get to decide, this is what art is, this is what the price is, this is what you need to buy, right?
Maybe kind of like in the music biz too. Like, I mean, I'm sure that he probably saw some people who he thought had no talent get big because for whatever reason they were sexy at the time. They had the look, they had the sound that was popular, but they had no substance. I don't know. That to me would make a lot more sense, unless he's a big art fan. I don't know.
Well, I mean, he certainly has the bank to go out and buy his art.
Well, that's true.
At this point, I read an article that said, Mark doesn't really care for fame. He doesn't really like being recognized. He doesn't want to get mobbed or ask for autographs and stuff like that. But he does enjoy the trappings of wealth. And he, apparently he's part of some old gentleman's club in London that he goes to relax and maybe, have a drink and read the paper and that kind of thing. And enjoys having the high life, but like the fame's thing he can do without. And I can totally dig that.
Yeah. I don't want to be recognized, but I also don't want to drive an 82 Honda for the rest of my life.
Right. Exactly. But then, he passed away in obscurity. And then what happened? Then all the vultures came. Oh, he was so brilliant. Now that he's dead, his stuff is valuable. So now we will put it in the gallery. And that's kind of what makes art valuable, is that you can't get any more of it, right? So now he's worthy of the gallery. And that's just kind of, there's a great Saturday Night Live skit, when Dana Carvey was chopping broccoli, And they basically convinced him that he needed to die. Because, look at Jim Morrison. He died, and his records continue to sell well. Peter Frampton's still alive? Yeah, not so much, So we need you to die. He's like, okay, well, you need me to go to an island for a couple of years? Like, oh, no, we're going to have to kill you. That just wouldn't be authentic to your fans.
We need you to get something at the bottom of a very large hill.
Yeah, Sid Vicious needs to die, and then Sex Pistols are immortal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, interesting that you would say that too. If somebody like, Sid Vicious was still around today, would he have the same, would he still enjoy the same stature that he has now because he died so young, and what could he have been, the crazy lifestyle that he led? I don't know. I mean, it does, unfortunately, the longer you live, it does take away from your legend.
Yeah, the more irrelevant you become. Like if Jimi Hendrix went through the 70s and made a bunch of average to shitty records, like would he still be the guitar god who left us at 27? Oh, what could have been?
You remember Jimi Hendrix's disco phase,
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
That could wreck anybody. The disco phase, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but good bass work again from Illsley. I mean, I just think he and Knopfler are really in tune together here. And his picking work from Knopfler again, top notch.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, Wild West End is the third song on the second side, eighth song over again. And here, again, it's a little gear shift. You went from the fast-paced, upbeat Sultans of Swing down to this kind of country, funky in the gallery, and now we're slowed down. And he's got that national guitar again, which in some points almost sounds like a ukulele.
Yeah. He can make it sound like a couple of different things. Like, I mean, if you didn't know what this thing was, you would think he had a couple of different deals on this. This is another one that I hadn't heard before. I love this song. Like, it just sounds like, just really cool, walking in the Wild West End. That sounds all right to me. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, West End London in the 70s is different from, what it is today,
Yeah.
And he's talking about going out to get his coffee and hitting on a waitress who thinks she's a little too good for him, It's like just another angel in the crowd, and talking about going to Chinatown, maybe seeing some prostitutes out, maybe, I don't know. But, there's backroom gambling down there, got to duck down the doorway, but you also got duck to eat in Chinatown,
I love that. I love that's a great turn of phrase. I like the walking in the Wild West End, walking with your wild best friend, like that. Is that the place that you go, like this is your home that you love to go to, and all of the things that you can see. Yeah, it's I love this song.
Just another angel in the crowd, and I'm walking in the Wild West End. Walking in the Wild West End. Walking with your wild best friend.
Go-go dancing girl, DJ says she's Mandy. She's dancing high and I move by. The close-ups can get rough. Which I feel like is a good from far, but far from good kind of reference.
Correct.
Yeah, she's kind of a neck down dancer kind of thing.
Everything's great till the lights come on. Oh.
Right, yeah, sort of thing. But no, it's telling a story. Sultans of Swing was about South London. This is about West London. And I guess you would. I feel like Notting Hill is central London. It is to the west. I guess you could call that part of West London and Portobello. He writes Portobello Bell eventually. In the next couple years. So he's good at taking his surroundings and turning them into relatable songs. Although I've lived there at this point. Growing up, I didn't know the difference between Portobello or Deptford or Notting Hill. I don't know where any of those places are.
Right. But it sounds cool.
It sure does, Jackson. It sure does.
Sounds like the place I want to be.
Yeah. But then playing a little slide on that old national guitar is pretty cool. Again, he's just kind of showing off his chops here in a lot of different ways. And not super flashy. Just very solid.
Yeah, and I think there's a little piano at the beginning. That's something we haven't heard before on this record.
By the way, when I was at Rockin' Pod with Pantheon, there's a guy up there, I guess he was with the Drifters back in the day, and he said, because he was in Hawaii, he said, it's actually pronounced ukulele, not ukulele, it's ukulele.
Oh, sorry.
I still don't think I'm going to adopt that. It's too ingrained to be ukulele, and it just doesn't come up that much. Maybe if I said it 10 times a day, every day, I would make the transition, but it's like twice a year or something like that. I'm sorry, but it's probably just going to be ukulele. And And we wrap up the record with Lions.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think this is about, this song, Lions?
That's a good question. When you hear the word and when it's used in popular culture, like to me, it's a lion is always like the head of the the pride, the king of the jungle. Is that what it's like to be a man? You have to be a lion. You have to be in charge.
Right. And it's very much the symbol of the British, right? It's on the royal crests, the rugby team, the national, football team, they're the Lions. They've got lions on their shirts, so that's very much a show of power here. But it's also kind of like it's showing, because look, in the late 70s, England's having a tough time again. We got recession. We got people squatting in flats. We got a lot of people on the dole. And it's kind of telling a story about there's a girl out looking for fun. Is she a prostitute? I don't know. Look out. The church is looking for more people to show up, but they don't show up like they used to, kind of thing. And the evening paper is full of horrors. And is this about the decline of England in the 70s? The last line, what happened to the Lions?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I would think that it's tough to grow up in a country and then have it, like you said, have it kind of fall off a little bit. And you're still very proud to be from there, but it's tough when you look around and times are tough. And you wonder how do we lose our way? How are we not still the big dog on the international map?
Yeah, and I can relate to that. I lived in London for 3.5 years. I think there was one mass shooting. I lived in the Netherlands for 7 or 8 months. There were none.
Mm-hmm.
And I only had to be here about 5 weeks before there was one in my town, not just one in the nation. While I was gone for 4 years, there were 2,500 mass shootings in our nation. But to have one a mile and a half from my home, yeah, that'll wake you up and say, welcome back to America, Wolfman.
USA.
But, she's reading in the paper about a swing to the right, but she's thinking about a stranger in the night. So, like, she's reading like, okay, yeah, we're getting more conservative, I guess, here. And Thatcher would be not far from this time.
Mm-hmm.
But then, she's still got to go, even if she's not a prostitute, she's still looking for some kind of companionship. She's looking for somebody to spend her time with. So I'm not sure exactly what he's talking about there. But
so here's, you've got another line here. Drunk old sailor, he gives her a fright. He's a crazy lion howling for a fight. So is that the same thing too? We used to be tough. We used to be, we used to be in charge. We used to be number one, and now we're, it's just some old guy who's trying to, relive the past.
A congregation late again. It's getting darker all the time. Flag.
Yeah, and just another chill song about day-to-day life, stuff that you see right out your window or you see on the street, which is very country, right?
Right.
Country can't have, lyrics like, I'm standing next to a mountain, chopping down with the edge of my hand. Like, it has to be like my old pickup trucks beat. You have to be able to look out your window and be like, my woman done did me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The plow won't work anymore. I'm out of money, or it's payday. It's time to party. It has to be something they can relate 100% to. If you get too deep or use too much imagery,
you're going to lose them.
Exactly. And he gets that. He really gets that. There's a little spare backup singing throughout on this on Lions, the fight bit. But, I think this is a story about what's going on around him, what's going on in England and London, and what he sees day to day.
What I like on here is he kind of channels his inner Jeff Beck on this one, and it sounds like he's just ever so slightly working that whammy bar in, just kind of giving it that little push, little pinch there to make some interesting sounds.
All right, well, so that's the album. I mean, overall, as a debut, what do you think of this from Dire Straits?
I don't think there's a bad track on here. I don't think there's anything that, we always talk about, well, there's that one song that you probably skip over. I wouldn't skip over any of these. I think this is a very solid debut effort. It's all over the map. There really is no style to any of this. Like no two of the songs sound exactly the same. And the ones that are kind of in the same vein are separated from each other. Like you don't get the ones that sound like the country songs aren't together, so you kind of get a little bit of a break. I think this is really good.
No, I agree with you. It spent 132 weeks on the UK albums chart, so and probably mostly on the power of Sultans of Swing.
Right.
Water of Love may have had something to do with it, but that's great, especially at this time when, again, punk ruled the airways or disco was on the other side of things, right? So this didn't really fit into either of those things. It just kind of shows you don't just chase the trends. If you do your own thing, you believe in it.
And if it's solid enough, you will prevail.
That's right. That's right. And this kind of started a run that for a while there, they basically made an album a year, for the next 4 years. Communique would come in 1979. Making Movies would come in 1980. More stuff, fodder for classic rock for sure. Love Over Gold didn't come till 1982. But then Knopfler started to get a lot of success on his own, kind of apart from Dire Straits. I mean, it kind of happened early. Yes, after 1993 or whatever, he was done kind of permanently with Dire Straits and went on to make a bunch of solo albums. But, Steely Dan, those guys picked up and said, okay, he's going to come in and record with us. The taskmasters at Steely Dan, like, no, he's perfect for the kind of sound we need. We'll get him in here to do that. Bob Dylan, got him on to play on his Infidels record, which is a pretty good latter-day Bob Dylan record that a lot of people probably don't know that much about. Mick Taylor was also on that record as well. But and then he's doing soundtracks, right? He's doing the soundtrack to Cal. He's doing the soundtrack to Local Hero, which they ended their shows with. It's the last thing on Alchemy, which is kind of surprising. It's like the band lets you do a solo track during the band times. Like, well, it's my band. I am the band.
It's not so much that they let me. I'm just telling them
just doing
what
it.
Yeah, you might want to practice this because we're playing it.
And of course, Princess Bride was probably the one that he's most famous for. Although I liked his work on Wag the Dog, which was a political comedy. Woody Harrelson, Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro, Ed Heche, really good stuff on there. And it's pretty obviously Mark Knopfler on there.
Right.
But yeah, and he's got a great kind of best of, if you will, called Screen Playing, where he takes stuff from Coming Home and Princess Bride, Cal, and a few things. Last Exit to Brooklyn to put together a nice little best of his soundtrack. Screen Playing is it's called, and that's a good one. But I would encourage people to go out and check out his solo material as well. Sailing to Philadelphia is a fantastic album. It's got a lot of guest stars, people like James Taylor and folks that you would know on there. Lots of different genres, very well produced. But seeing him live was just a real treat for me. Again, I've done it 3 times. I would do it again in a heartbeat. I tried to see him when I first moved to London. He played Royal Albert Hall. The tickets were just crazy. And I don't believe he's toured since then. But if you ever get a chance to see Mark Knopfler, even though it's solo, even though it'll be at a theater someplace smaller, do not pass it up. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they would blow to the sky with Brothers in Arms. I mean, couldn't be any bigger. Tens of millions of copies sold, playing Live Aid, biggest MTV hits that there are.
And it's interesting too that if you just listen to, I understand they're not back to back, but if you listen to this record and then Brothers in Arms, how different they are, you wouldn't think that this band would end up having a record that would sell 30 million copies.
I know. Especially they put out the EP, the extended dance play in '83 between Love Over Gold and Alchemy with Twisted by the Pool on there, which is kind of a funny song, if you ask me. And I think they kind of did that because Mark was so busy doing other things. Like, okay, well, we got to do something. We got to get something Dire Straits out there, because Love Over the Gold was a huge hit. I mean, I think that Love Over Gold, 1982, their 4th album, only had 5 tracks on it.
Then you get into the whole, is this really an EP?
Well, but it's 41 minutes because Telegraph Road is 14 minutes, and everything else is 6 minutes or more. So, I mean, it's about as long as the first album. It's 5 songs instead. And I love Telegraph Road. It's an amazing song. He played it on the last tour I saw him on. He played it to a point, and then he stopped like 2 shows before I saw him. And he even said, you can call out whatever you want, but it's not going to make a difference. We're not going to play it. I'm like, Telegraph Road, bring back Telegraph Road. And here's the other cool part. You can, so on that tour, you could order like an MP3 of the concert. You could get, and it comes on like a stick, like a memory stick that's shaped like a guitar. Which is kind of a cool little souvenir. So I ordered it for the show we went to. Like, that'd be a cool souvenir from that show, you know? And in that bit, because I was in the third row wherever I was, he's like, yeah, scream all you want. It's not going to matter. You could hear me say, Telegraph Road! You could maybe barely make it out on there if you really listen to it, you know? So I hope I still have that somewhere. But, I mean, you know, other than Sultans of Swing, yeah, you're right, Jackson. It's not like if you heard this, you're like, oh, yeah, by 1985, they're going to be the biggest band in the world. They're going to have all these pop hooks and everything in there.
Yeah.
It's different. There's definitely an evolution that happened over the next 6-7 years.
Yeah, and I think part of it too was that hit at the right time in '85 with the music video, the fact that they were from England, and that was a huge thing. I remember in '85 with Duran Duran had come out, and so I think that they were primed for that, and having Sting at the beginning didn't hurt anything either.
Absolutely, because the Police were kind of done at that point. So, and if I'm not mistaken, Dream of the Blue Turtles hadn't quite come out yet in 1985. I think that was 1986.
I have to go back and look at that. But hearing his voice, like you knew who it was. You knew like this was going to be. Even though that was kind of, I think, a last-minute deal to not get sued, to put him on there, that definitely propelled that track to be huge.
Well, that is our 125th episode, folks, on Dire Straits' debut album, which came out in 1978, featuring the immortal single Sultans of Swing, launching the career of Mark Knopfler, who I got to tell you is one of my very favorite guitar players of all time. One of the very best, and kind of beyond genre, right? He's not really a country player. He's not just a rock player. He's not a blues player. He can kind of do all that stuff, and has done all of it over the course of his career. Very talented songwriter, and all right, he doesn't have the most amazing soaring voice in the world. Well, it's good for the stories that he tells. It's good for the songs that he writes. And I think it's very soulful, and it communicates really well. It's always a pleasure to be able to go back and check out this one and look at it in the face of what else was going on in 78. The first Van Halen album comes out. Is it different from that? Yeah, it's very different from that. You know, what were the guys in Yes doing in 78? Was that Tormato? Was that Going for the One era? Steve Howe? So he was forging his own destiny with his own sound. And obviously it paid off. I mean, how many records did Brothers in Arms sell? 25 million, 30 million, more? I don't know. But enough so he could basically fold the band not too long after that and then embark on being Mark Knopfler solo, which I would say it's paid off financially, but it's got to be more rewarding spiritually and musically. So, as usual, folks, we want to know, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? You need to let us know. Email us. It's uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. You can also tweet us or DM us at ugly_werewolf or at actionjack72. You can let us know the bands, the records, the concerts, the DVDs, the rock properties you want us to talk about here on the show. And we got some fun stuff in the hopper coming up here very soon. I want to give shout-outs to Pantheon Podcast, of which we are a proud part. And you can check out pantheonpodcast.com. Got some new folks on there for you to check out, new shows that you will want to learn about. And, of course, our amazing sponsors at rarevinyl.com. Guys, you want your Dire Straits records? You want something special? Go to rarevinyl.com. Use code podcast. Save yourself 10%. They ship all over the world, and they have amazing stuff in their catalog. No previews for next week, not because I don't want to tell you, just because I'm not sure which show we're going to put up first. We've got a few things going on, and I'm getting ready to go to Amsterdam to see Metallica on the first couple of nights of their amazing worldwide tour, not only to celebrate 72 seasons, but what they're doing is they're playing 2 nights in a city, no repeat songs. So that's like 4.5, 5 hours, all different material. It's going to be epic. They kick it off in Amsterdam. I can't wait. Obviously, that show's going to come after I see the concerts. But until next time, to all you rock and rollers all around the world, be cool and stay safe.